welcome to the Women in Cybersecurity panel talk. And, sorry, my notes are malfunctioning. Okay, so I'm Victoria, also known as Jellyphish, and today our panelists and I are going to talk about our experience working and contributing to cybersecurity, and then I'm going to provide some historical perspective of women in computer and information sciences, because I do believe there are some historical elements still affecting the numbers for women in cybersecurity today, and of course this is all in an effort to make the profession a better, more inclusive space for everyone. So we really hope that you'll come away with some new perspective and motivation on how you can help support your peers that are women or minorities working in this space. All right, so let's dive right in with our panelist introductions. We can go left to right. Okay, so please introduce yourself, then tell us more about your unique path into cybersecurity and how you found your niche specialty area.
I can start. Did you give a full intro? Do you want to give a full intro? You should give a full intro.
For myself?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was going to go last, but okay.
Begin.
Alrighty. So, okay, when I started my career, I really had no idea what I was getting into. All I knew was that computers are interesting, and I really didn't like it when they gave me errors with no explanation. And then I had a little bit of perspective. My sister had passed on some stuff about cryptography and computer security. So I found it just enough interesting to just go full send and pick computer science as my degree program because back in the 2010, 14, there just wasn't a lot of cybersecurity programs out there besides the certification courses. So if you were going to college, computer science was the degree for you. So I went to Georgia Tech to finish up after transferring from a local school, and sorry, okay. I just kept looking for resources, women in cybersecurity groups, local meetups, hacker spaces, and eventually kind of got some traction with that. I finished my computer science degree and took it step by step. I found work in IT. I did some internships with security focused. I did graduate during the COVID crisis, so no one was really hiring. I did a security boot camp to kill some time. Studied for Security Plus, passed that, and then I ended up taking some work as a sysadmin in the operational technology and industrial control system field, which is where I'm working now as a network engineer security analyst for pulp and paper. And I hope to plan to stay in that area for the near term. So that's just kind of me and my background and how I came to be here in security. So.
All right. My handle is muteki, and my name is Cassandra. I'll answer to both, probably more likely muteki, honestly. So I have been through several different careers. I actually originally wanted to be a lawyer in doing business contract law in Asia for some reason. Yeah. And then I quickly realized that I'm way too much of a nerd for that, and I don't fit in with corporate-y people. So kind of dived into some tech areas. Worked at Apple Retail for a bit, which is actually really awesome. And then I saved up a bunch of money, traveled around the world for a bit, and then I ran out of money, so I came back and got a real job. Just bummer. Working in university, doing basically IT desktop support, and then kind of transitioned into being interested in security. I made friends with a lot of hackers, and they caught the bug from there, so I've pivoted into cloud security consulting since then. When I was in higher ed, I also took advantage of the tuition reimbursement and got a master's in computer science, which had absolutely nothing to do with my undergrad in political science. So. But as of now, I am at CrowdStrike as a cloud technical advisory consultant. So I hop into client cloud environments, rip them to shreds, and then get to yell at executives about it and make a lot of money. It's great. So that's me.
Okay, hey everybody. I'm Kelly Ohlert. I am a principal consultant in CrowdStrike Professional Services. How was your summer?
Fun. Why'd you ask?
So I've been at CrowdStrike about 2 years. My thing is tabletops. I specialize in executive and management tabletops, which is, if you've ever played D&D, you've done a tabletop, only I get to scare CEOs. It's a pretty good job. most of the time. Prior to that, I practiced law for 15 years, so
sorry.
good job not doing that, you know, and prior to that, I actually was a therapist for a while. So how'd I get here? Because I wasn't practicing security or computer law, I'll tell you that much, even though I talk about SEC 8K more than any human being ever should. Well, the answer is, a friend of mine who went to my law school, graduated the year after I did, he and I met randomly at a party from a friend who, in fact, Mike Zaleski, who we have in part to thank for this sign. And we're just talking, and my friend's doing GRC, governance, risk, and compliance stuff as a part of a project for Google. And he's like, I need more people who can work on this. He needed more people who could basically read a rule set and apply it to what people were doing, like reading a case law or a statute. He's like, Jesus, I can teach people the tech. I just need somebody who can read a rule set. So I said, I hate litigation, so let me do this. So I signed on to this project and then grew to be doing some more GRC stuff at that company. And some of that stuff was tabletops. And I'm like, oh, you know, like for SOC 2 stuff, testing your BCPs and IRPs. And I'm doing them and I'm like, holy crap, these are boring. You're a bunch of nerds. Why is nobody rolling dice around here? So I got into gamifying. I gave a talk at B-Sides Vegas a few years back, and based on that, these crazy people recruited me, and now I have a pretty awesome job. But, you know, we all have an atypical path to cybersecurity, so that's mine. Oh, and Nugget the Snuggle Wolf, by the way, is my miniature dachshund who will be here tomorrow. I'm just Gwydia. Not as cool as Nugget.
Love puppies. Okay, awesome. I'm Ayliffe. Thanks for being here, everyone. I'm still developing, let's say, the financial part of my cybersecurity career. I am focusing on privacy advisory and engineering. I grew a career that was quite successful in arts nonprofits. I got into that from making wearable technology, blinky clothes. I've always loved fashion, and merging that with sensors and lights was really fun for me. That led me into applying for a random TV show called America's Greatest Makers that Intel sponsored. They were trying to build a chip that would interface with Arduino back in 2015. I was working to make a police wearable, so I consider that kind of my first spark and interest in security. However, through that process, I was given business mentorship and lean startup design thinking methodologies from UC Berkeley, and I gravitated towards that for the rest of my 20s, where I ended up running a nonprofit where we taught business to musicians for 6 or 7 years. With the pandemic, they sold the music studio. We turned into more of an impact investment fund, and I was like, okay, time for me to go back to technology. So I went and did a class at Georgia Tech, got my Security Plus, and in the last, 3 months, I've dived deeper into privacy engineering, and I'm gonna take a class at Carnegie Mellon starting next weekend. So yeah, I think that this is a great perspective of like, I'm in the middle of it, and we have some seasons experience, so. Thanks for putting this together.
Oh, yes. Thank y'all for being here today. Okay. Great intros. If there's anything you could do differently, if you've reflected on your path, is there anything that you would do differently? Or maybe not?
I used to say I wouldn't go to law school. Mm-hmm. And I'm serious about that. Look, law school is really expensive. I'll tell anybody, if someone else is going to pay for you to do it, it's an amazing experience. You learn how to think differently. A lot of the ways I handle clients and I think through problems now, I learned there. But I'm 20 years out of law school almost, and still in 6-figure debt. So that is not so much to tell my sob story, but to say, think about the accredited education you choose. Don't just default into law school or cybersecurity or a master's or anything. Do it if it's going to get you where you think you want to go, but that's not at the necessary level up for anything.
Yeah, I think I'm very happy I didn't go to law school. And yeah. I love knowing people that actually just help me justify those decisions too. It's pretty refreshing and nice. I don't know that I would have done anything differently. I think that's kind of, sometimes you have to try a bunch of different things before you get where you're going. Like, I mentor a lot of folks newer to the industry, younger, older, whatever, it doesn't matter what their age is or even what their gender is or anything else. But one of the things that I say is basically to just try different things or look at job listings of all different kinds and figure out what you like and what you don't like. And what you're gonna find is you find what you don't like a lot quicker than you find what you do like sometimes. And there's a lot of value in that. So I can't look back on my own journey and say, oh, I should have done this differently. Okay, maybe I should have bought a bunch of Apple stock in 2003 when I was on AIM on my really old PowerBook. But yeah, I don't think there's anything I would have done differently other than predicting the future, which is impossible.
Totally. I love that you said, what you don't like more. So the thing with the boot camp, which is a pro and a con, is now they're they don't hold as much weight. And I experienced that. It was 6 months, and I've learned every week was a different aspect of cybersecurity, where I learned quickly what I'll say would be harder to master and get a paying job for. But at the same time, I was told, just enough to be dangerous. I could go and break everything. And so I kind of feel I should have actually looked further into a master's program or something like that, and or waited a little bit longer. I found out as soon as my boot camp was over that Georgia Tech started offering a master's class instead of the boot camp because of this feedback from boot camps. But at the same time, I continue to learn, and I think that once I found my niche, and because I've been going to events and meeting people, it was easier to start igniting my network to be this is what I'm focusing on, and mentors were flooding in and resources. And so I think keep trying, but also do it intentionally. What I've also been reflecting on in my experience is without the intentionality, you kind of get lost, and then you get people pushing you to what they want you to do and taking a little bit of more control over your life and your career.
Yeah, I think what you were saying with Techie, with at the end of the day not wanting to necessarily do anything differently, having maximized your opportunities as you've stepped through things, and realizing that we're also all far more limited based on region and hang on. Region and cost. Obviously, if we don't have infinite amounts of money. Oh, we're back. Okay.
The second you stepped away, of course.
Yeah. It'll limit whether or not you can go to law school or do a security boot camp or just jump into doing a master's program.
Which, by the way, as someone with a master's, do not automatically do a master's. Think very carefully, because I am still burnt out and I graduated 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Also, get someone else to pay for it.
Yeah.
Your employer.
That's a TLDR for this whole question.
Okay. All right. So yeah. Let's revisit for a moment our central question, which is what we're here for today, was what is it like being a woman in cybersecurity? Since you've all spent a good deal of time in this community, I'm sure at some point you've been asked this. What you might not often be asked is how you actually feel about this very open-ended question. So can each of you share some of your thoughts and feelings about this question, how it serves us?
Oh, I hate this question. I legitimately hate this question, because it's so broad, and we all have such different experiences. And I'll give you a very solid example of that. So I worked in higher ed in IT, and at some point went from desktop support into there's a central IT team that did Office 365, Azure Active Directory administration. That was my pivot into cloud security. And this team had my manager, who was the head of the team, but also had a woman named Peggy. And Peggy was the most senior person pretty much in our team, in the organization, in Central IT. She had been at Penn is the University of Pennsylvania, by the way. She had been at Penn since the 70s, the literal 70s. She has more institutional knowledge than probably anyone, technically speaking, at the entire university. So I was talking to her at some point, and she's like, I don't get why there are all these like groups for women in tech. Like, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, like, we're here. It's she and I. And I kind of was like, you know, I get that personally because I've never felt the need for that, but these aren't for us. The groups are not for us. The reason that we are where we are in senior technical positions especially is because we're goddamn steamrollers. We are the people, the women or otherwise, like I kind of barely call myself a woman. I'm very much I don't know, I'm just I don't fit any of the typical, like, quote unquote feminine characteristics really. But the point is, we're extremely assertive. We don't take shit. We snap back quicker than a lot of people do. We're not very feminine presenting. And we have had a lot of success because we fit in with the old school guys that dominated in different technical areas. So the point is not that, we shouldn't have the women's groups because we made it. It's because we made it when a whole lot of other women and other gendered minorities did not. When you have underrepresented genders and you're raised with patterns of communication that are a little bit maybe more deferential, or you're raised to be a little less assertive, to like let others speak up more, then you're at a disadvantage automatically if you're in a room full of people that are very assertive. And some of those people are people like me and Peggy who don't necessarily defer to others as easily as some others might. So I think that's kind of my, for me, being a woman in cybersecurity, or whatever, being a person who presents as feminine in cybersecurity, my personal experience with it is it hasn't been an issue because of the characteristics that I bring that are natural defenses against it being a problem. And the fact that I can recognize that makes me feel a sense of responsibility for being a very vocal, visible, non-male in these spaces, and to point out when folks are not being treated fairly because of gender or otherwise, or when there's language, like Heidi mentioned in the keynote, when there's language that might put folks off and things like that. So that's kind of my very long tail answer to that question.
Me? Okay. Yeah, I sometimes I grew up with all brothers. I have a twin brother. I have a father who I say took me from training wheels to motorcycles. So like being tomboyish is a part of me, but I'm also love fashion and have loved fashion since I was like 2. So I think the hardest part is, taking me seriously, or thinking just because I'm curious and want to know what's happening in your brain and how you think, that does not equate to flirting. I have a lot of guy friends now that I've been networking in cybersecurity, and a lot of people are quick to be like, oh, they want to do something more with you, or that's a lot of the vibes I've been getting. But I think that in general, most people want to help and support, and so there's just I don't know. I think that there's a basis in general, and even if it's not in cybersecurity, in the grocery store, if I help someone out with their whatever they're doing, they're like, oh, is she flirting? It's sort of it's a cultural bias that is maybe heightened because the industry is so male dominated.
So, like Muteki, I'm not a fan of that question, but I come to it from a very different space. I mean, I think a lot of how we get here today is tracking. Men tend to be tracked men in security tend to be tracked into positions like engineer, software developer, IR responder, whereas women tend to be tracked into things like female engineer, female developer, female responder. And it's funny, but it's true. Sometimes I like to step back and think of things from the profession and not the gender. Because you would never say, like, that guy is an amazing male engineer. Well, wait, what? And so one of the ways I kind of deal with it is I ask the folks around me to kind of just question that assumption. To your point about language and you know, how we present ourselves, I'm usually not too confrontational. Weirdly enough, despite the fact that I was a trial lawyer, I hate confrontation. I tell you I'll spend the rest of the day thinking about every dumb thing I said up here. But I do like to challenge folks to help us all be better. Words, like Heidi said, words matter. So if I heard someone say, oh man, especially a male friend, oh man, she is like the greatest female engineer. Is she the greatest female engineer, or is she just a great engineer?
Wait, does she engineer females? That's so weird.
Oh, and if that's the case, that's amazing. That is amazing, and I am down with that and very supportive within limits. You do you. But seriously, it's to me, the way I take it is that the word matters. If you're talking about women in cybersecurity, make sure you're talking about women and cybersecurity, not differentiating because someone is female presenting, but rather talking to them as a member of this community.
I love it. All great points. Okay, yeah, I mean, nothing to disagree with here. I don't like the question either. I don't like how it makes me feel. Just some thoughts. You know, it implies, by the very nature of the question, that women in cybersecurity, tech, computing were not accepted, that we kind of don't belong, that there's an issue here. And, you know, it makes me uncomfortable. It highlights some of my own insecurities with being accepted in a professional space where I've worked really hard to contribute and make meaningful contributions. Yeah, it's like HR asking, you know, if you can just tell me why people are discriminating against you, we can fix this.
Isn't that your job, HR?
And, you know, it's not just cybersecurity that has this problem with working women that it's resistant to address. You know, we're not the only professional field in the US where women are made to feel unwelcome. So the broader implications of this question are really concerning just as a working woman. Okay, so that's our thoughts. And, you know, we'd like to go over some numbers. We've got this very nice chart here by the US Census Bureau. And the thing is, we can't really understand numbers for women in cybersecurity, computer and information sciences, without looking farther back and the historical context of us working in this field. So according to the data reviewed by some survey statisticians at the US Census Bureau working in STEM fields, the roles are categorized accordingly as social science, mathematical workers, life and physical scientists, engineers, and computer workers. It was found that while women have made gains overall from being 38% of the total workforce in 1970 to 48% in 2019, but our representation in STEM fields has gone from 8% in 1970 to 27% in 2019. So it doesn't quite represent the rest of our distributions as regular, I guess, in other professions. Okay, computer work specifically accounts for 80%, the majority of all STEM employment. So when our numbers fluctuate in computer science or cybersecurity, it really affects this overall distribution. Okay, so women only accounted for roughly 25% of computer work as of 2019. That's only up from 20% in 1970. Of course, you can see we had this rise and the numbers peaked in the 90s and then they steadily dropped off over the next 3 decades. And you might say, okay, well that's also 2019, you know, where we are today in terms of the distribution of women in cybersecurity, which is a great question. Not that much better off. Okay, so this graph demonstrates as of 2023, this is from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, found that women occupied 26.9% of computer and mathematical occupations. But if we're specifically looking at information security analysts, that's the government catch-all term for cybersecurity practitioner roles, you will see that the percentage is only 19.3% for 2023. There are some other anomalies. We have a huge drop during COVID. and we're kind of climbing, but you know, time will tell how that goes. Okay, so this is numbers from the U.S. government and their census data, but this lines up with research conducted by ISC2, where they found the percentage of women in cybersecurity to be at 20 to 25% in their 2023 report, and it's the same bandwidth as a study conducted by Deloitte in collaboration with the female quotient group, 20 to 25%. Taken to note, for these different data sets, Deloitte and ISC2, they would be looking at participation of women in cybersecurity internationally, whereas, of course, the U.S. data is just U.S. working women. Okay, and then in ISC2's report, they were looking and trying to find some positive markers, like as the average age of respondents decreased, the percentage increased. So for those under age 30, the percentage of women was 26%. Age 40 and up, the percentage waffled between roughly 16 and 13%. They attribute this to positively changing standards and DEI initiatives, and it could be, but it could also be that women are additionally discriminated against as we age and choose to have families, etc. So, all right, that's a lot of numbers. Let's take a step back and look at this trend line again. Yeah, we've got 1970 to 1990. We're just going to go back here so we can reference that. I'd like to hear your thoughts on these trend lines and what are some factors that you think might be affecting our numbers based on your exposure in the field.
Somewhere in the 90s, people figured, or men figured out that you could make money and technology was booming. It wasn't experimental and just some weird thing that random weird people did.
Yeah, what I'm really curious to see is what those numbers are going to be in 10 to 20 years. So in the second grade, which was a very long time ago, I won some state award for math. Yay, math! But then when I got to high school, even though I went to a magnet high school, somebody said, a magnet high school for all girls, by the way, somebody said, math's not really your thing. And I believed it. Even though I got good grades in math, even though I got really good grades in science, somebody said, it's not your thing. So I did track. My bachelor's and master's were in psychology. I went to law school, and in part, I went to law school instead of doing a PhD because I didn't want to do any more psychometrics and statistics because somebody told me when I was, knee-high to a grasshopper, you aren't good at that. Fast forward now, I have a daughter, and she is in high school. And she loves science. And no one has ever thought about telling this kid or her other friends that that is not a thing she can do. And I'm not saying that people don't still tell young women that. I'm saying that it's more taboo because people are thinking about their words. So I think this is a long way of saying I'm looking forward to seeing how all of these young women in STEM, kids in STEM, little boys who have been told, no, you can't say that about little girls because she just kicked your ass on that algebra test, look, and how they change these numbers coming forward.
You actually just reminded me, there's one other important part to my story which explains part of why I'm such a steamroller. I was homeschooled. I didn't even go to kindergarten or daycare, I think. And my mom also did her A+ certification when I was a young teen. She was taking apart computers in the living room. I learned Python when I was 9 years old, and this was the mid-90s, so it was not a thing that you did. This crazy. Little kids having iPads nowadays is the craziest thing to me. I'm this didn't exist when I was a kid, for one thing. But I think the point was I didn't get socialized in school for anyone to tell me I couldn't do it. I literally, my first experience of going to school was community college when I was 14. And at that point, I was already this little, I was actually kind of a brat probably, but in a good way because I did not take no for an answer. So I think that was part of the reason that I've been so bulletproof the whole time. So it really, just hearing you talk about that, that makes me pretty fucking mad, honestly.
Yep. That's true. The numbers. One of the other things I do is I nanny which is a very feminine job, but I have to eat as I'm investing in my future. And the children have a lot of opportunities. And when I worked in nonprofits, we focused on adults because we've believed that when you're older and you have less resources, you have less community because you're not in school, and you have less access to funds to invest in yourself and your education. So I do think that it's important to also think about folks like myself who are transitioning careers or that want to learn about this. There are a lot of people who I'm friends with that are in the service industry and are just like, I'm going to do this forever and I'm going to always have a like blue collar job because I didn't think that college was right for me. So I think that in general our culture is still nuclear family based. I go to a bunch of conferences because networking I know is important, and one of the ones I went to that was in Atlanta, several women came up to me and they're like, well, if you don't get a job here, you could at least find a husband. And I was like, what? I'm not here for that. I'm here to like grow a career. So it's just kind of going back to say like this is Atlanta, so maybe I'm speaking more about like the Southern culture. But I think that when I look at the future of the economy and of children that are about to be adults and building their own careers, the competition's gonna be hyper, and also money-wise, to have a family, you're gonna have to have both people, whether it's not a traditional family, you know, queer families exist, they're gonna have to all be working, and especially for sending kids to events. So I think that this cultural norms do say a lot about the numbers, especially after the 2008 recession and stuff like that. And then the pandemic, of course, but I also believe that it's not gonna just be women that will be diversifying the workplace in the next 10 to 20 years. It'll be non-binaries, it'll be trans, it'll be all people. I mean, America is every conglomerate melting pot of nationalities and mixed people. So I'm grateful, I'm like optimistic about our future in terms of diversity.
Let me ask a quick question. Raise your hand if you have gotten a job ever without knowing somebody there, past the fast food, you know, the kitchen. Okay, so not many folks here have gotten a job of any sort without knowing somebody in the organization. I did, but it was in pastry. Or in this industry, how many people have gotten a job in security or technology without knowing anybody at the company you worked for? Okay, maybe 10, 15%. To your point, the people are important. You want to change this stuff. You look around, you talk to the students, but you also talk to the folks who you think are your peers. You know, how many times do we put our hands up and go, crap, I was laid off, and then everybody tries to help? That's your socialization piece right there. You know, part of that key is just reaching out. You know, my friend at a party was like, you could change your career today. You know, talk to who's around you. There's somebody who needs a you, and you're going to need that somebody. And if that someone is a woman, a minority, of any type, that's super cool.
Yeah. Okay, so to kind of explain our 20 to 25%, again, looking back at these historical factors and the social factors that are contributing, I found a lot of great resources that correlate the rise in women as they were a driving force early on in their roles as hands-on operators during the vacuum tube, punch card, and the mainframe days. Because programming and operations were viewed as secretarial or the dirty work, and this proved to be at least our foot in the door. So women that were professionally trained in mathematics or logic, such as philosophy, that weren't interested in traditional occupations like accounting and teaching, were finding their way into this field, this new field. And at that time, the need for anyone who had aptitude in math and logic was more important than gender preferences. And as businesses were becoming more reliant on computers' efficiency. So, you've got things like the all-female programming teams for the ENIAC and the IBM Systems Service Women. And you've got Grace Hopper being a thought leader for both the Navy and the NSA and a lot of other government organizations. To understand what changed that was so fundamental to bringing about this drop is one really big thing is the introduction of the personal computer to the mass market in 1977. You had like the Apple II, TRS-80, Commodore PET, and their release shaped the age at which people were able to have access to learn computing, and also as they were being brought into the home, there were far more cultural and social factors affecting how, boys and girls were kind of introduced to computing and who was kind of encouraged to pursue it versus not. Yes, so, sorry, I'm tracking. We've got a crucial decade, 1974 to 84. You had the release and advancement of the moderately sized computers, gendered expectations for STEM fields that were being placed on young adults at the time. And yeah, it just laid the groundwork for unwelcoming environment that has been created for women looking to participate and be successful in this field. One example I want to look at is Carnegie Mellon in the, I guess like mid to late 90s. There was research conducted by Jane Margulis, a social scientist, at the request of Alan Fisher, who is a professor at Carnegie Mellon School of Computing, because he wanted to know why the CS programs had such low enrollment numbers for women in the mid to late 90s. And the numbers had been climbing up until the 80s, and then they weren't. There was just a sudden drop. And it wasn't just 1-2 bad years of enrollment. I mean, it was turning into a decade. And in interviewing all of the CS students, male and female, over the course of a 4-year period, Margulis found some key factors. There was a greater level of exposure and encouragement given to boys versus girls to pursue and learn computing from a young age. And the family computer was more often placed in a son's rooms versus the daughter's. And boys were more than twice as likely to have been gifted a computer by their parents than girls. So coupled with the fact that they had found almost every female student in Carnegie Mellon's computer science program shared that their father had prioritized working with their brothers to help them learn coding and just general use of the PC, we see how those factors were beginning to shape the field in the 70s and early 80s. And then the enrollment numbers dropping, or there was an increased dropout rate for women post-enrollment despite having good grades because of the negative treatment they were experiencing in the classroom environments from professors and peers. So all of these discoveries were essential to informing Carnegie Mellon what actions they needed to take to support women and other minorities in the computer science programs. Alan Fisher and other faculty were able to improve their curriculums, like having 2 CS tracks, one for advanced coders and one for complete beginners. They organized additional free tutoring services to make sure all students had access to additional resources. And they also adjusted their admissions reviews to not give undue preference to those with previous coding experience. And in total, what's instructive about this one example is that the faculty of Carnegie Mellon challenged their assumptions, and they were willing to be proved wrong and acknowledge the need to make reforms for their programs. And in doing so, the percentage of women entering the School of Computer Science rose from 7% in 1995 to 42% in 2000. So if you're interested in knowing more, there's a whole book on their findings called Unlocking the Clubhouse, and I really recommend it. But biggest takeaways, again, you've got these negative social factors, a lack of behavioral standards, and then insufficient resources were the biggest contributors to creating an unwelcome environment. So that leads us to our next question, which is maybe a bit more personal, but maybe what's an instance when you recall someone or something affecting you negatively as you were pursuing, cybersecurity as a profession, and how did you overcome it?
So I got this one. So I'm later to the profession, and I'll be honest, as a woman, there's some bonus to that because I was in my late 30s when I came to this, so I hit the 40 I don't the fuck right in the middle of it, like I was great. But early on, weirdly enough, I was lucky that when I switched from what I was doing, which at that point was Social Security disability, which, look, certainly kept food on the table, but tech pays better. And things improved, like I found out that I would probably be able to send my child to college and eat, things like that. But here was something weird. My friends from non-tech started treating me really weird, and I didn't see that coming. I didn't experience problems as a woman in tech because I came in I think, a little higher level based on my previous experience as a human being. But people around me who were not in tech started treating me weird. Like, believe me, I don't have Lexus money and I never started spending like that, but I got the weirdest responses like, oh, now that you work for a big company, you just think you're too good, or, oh, well, I guess you wouldn't remember what it was like to have to work late or something, because, you know, I never work late. When I talked to some of my guy friends who had come to the profession, this area, late, they didn't have that experience. And I'm still noodling on exactly why that is, but I can say that the vast majority of my friend group now is our community, plus a few folks who didn't get really weird when I moved into a different world.
I get that. I think that, I don't know if the word negative is like probably too strong, but it's caused friction. I'm gonna call it mentor whiplash is what I've experienced. So I get the, sometimes from women, but you know, some men also are like, oh, well, you just need to be curious and always active and out there networking and you're doing all the right things. Anyone can teach you the technical side. And then all of my rejections from jobs have been, oh, you're not technical enough. And then it's like, okay, well, what's the answer? Like, how do I keep going? And what I've learned is, and I don't know if this is limitations or biases, but I have to continuously be proving myself. And I know that this is true for my queer friends of color. They're always having to prove themselves and do extra work and be extra specific on their words, back to our keynote, and have sort of a mask that they put on to work. And so I think that, you know, you need to be good in your job and you need to be trustworthy, and the morals in this industry, you know, there's a spectrum. You're either on the dark web or you're on the other side. You're on the blue team. Not all red teams are nefarious, but you know what I'm trying to say. So I think that there is a little bit of this is why you have to know somebody and you have to prove yourself. I think that the second time I went to DEF CON, which was this last August, I felt the friction was starting to kind of go away. And I think that is, I don't know, I'm not a man, so I don't know if there's men that are transitioning like me that don't have that same experience, but that is something that I've experienced.
So there's two things that I kind of thought of as both of you were talking. One of them, I've had this conversation a lot of times, a lot of different people in different levels, different underrepresented groups, things like that. So one of the things is oftentimes companies, or people, probably more like people, honestly, it's people that really just, you know, can discriminate whether intentionally or not, is men get hired based on potential and women get hired based on proven fact, like prove that when they prove what they can do. So those are two very different standards. And the other thing I'm thinking of is, you know, kind of talking about the networking side. I couldn't even think of an example to answer this question. And then I realized, like, okay, literally my last like 3 or 4 jobs have all been based on networking. Mm-hmm. So I started I worked Apple retail, it's retail. I learned some computer stuff, but mostly it's customer service, and like you ship it out to Depot because you can't fix it in the store because it's, you know, a walled garden. But that was fun. Like, oh, I can't replace the key on your freaking, you know, laptop, but got to send it out. It's very weird. Anyway, that aside, after Apple, when I went on my little trip and then I ran out of money and I had to come home and get a real adult job, I had drinks with a friend who I knew from Apple, and he worked in higher ed. He worked at one of the schools, and he's like, oh, I just switched to a different position, but I know they're looking for like part-time temp staff. So he got me an interview. I started part-time doing AV and help desk, did that for 3 months, and then I was able to show that I can learn literally anything, got moved to full-time desktop support. It was my networking within the university when they migrated to Office 365 that I actually got to know the entire, like, internal central IT Office 365 team because of that migration and because I was leading the charge. So that next job, my jump from desktop support to systems administrator was based on networking. I met people through the cybersecurity community that worked at Penn. That was my pivot into the first consulting gig that I had. I literally knew someone, and I started that job in a senior role with a really nice amount of pay because I had a really strong set of referrals. And then moving to my most recent gig, again, like I knew people there, and that again, like strong referrals. So I don't think that I can answer that, those, if I had stumbling blocks in my getting hired, that would have been where I had them, but I basically avoided most of them because I had networking working on my side. And like, that is incredibly privileged. That is a massive privilege for anyone, not just someone who is not male.
Can I I'm sorry, just say one thing. I'm not gonna make anybody show of hands, but how many of you have thought, I can't get that job because I'm not technical enough? I could talk for 4 hours on that, and someday I will give a talk on that. But the thing I'll say is, as somebody who has never taken a computer class, has learned most of her tech on the job, and is a geek, because I have a Dragon Quest tattoo, you can learn anything. You might not be technical enough for the job you want, right? But you are definitely technical enough for a job that'll get you there. Just wanted to put that out there.
Capacity.
Sorry.
No, this is great. This is all good. Okay, yeah, so you've heard some personal anecdote about our experience, and now we're gonna look at some research that's been done recently by an organization called Women in Cybersecurity, or also paraphrased as WESIS. And they recently, I think it's their first year doing a state of inclusion report, and they partnered with a DEI firm, Illyria, and their goal was to identify barriers that are keeping women from being recruited, retained, and advanced at the same rates as their male counterparts. So they collected data from just over 1,000 employees, approximately 35% men, 65% women, representing more than 20 different organizations, of which some are WESIS and non-WESIS strategic partners, and by their own definition, a WESIS strategic partner provides year-round support to ensure they meet their mission and objectives. So that usually monetary donations or donations in kind, like scholarships, classes, and upskilling, and providing additional networking opportunities to their members through conference, villages support and that kind of thing. And their key findings were that women were excluded at a rate 2 times higher than men, and this is just like common everyday occurrences kind of in the working environments. Women are 5 times more likely to cite their direct managers and peers as sources of that exclusion. The second highest rate of exclusion for women in cybersecurity was identified as a lack of career growth and opportunities, and Illyria reported that their research has not found this in any other industry other than cybersecurity that they're tracking. So it's kind of a specific issue that we have in this profession. Women in cybersecurity experience a glass ceiling around the 6 to 10 year mark within their careers. And employees who identified with a disability had higher rates of exclusion than those who identified with the majority. And then WESIS strategic partners had 49% fewer experiences of exclusion and reported 64% higher levels of job satisfaction than non-WESIS strategic partners. And before we jump into our next question, the comparison of strategic partners and non-WESIS strategic partners is the interesting fact that they are more likely, I guess, to be actually more actively supporting women in cybersecurity. And I think that's the reason for the differences. But okay, so based on these findings, what's a key takeaway for each of you, and how do you think it will affect the future of women in cybersecurity, or the profession as a whole?
I think this is sort of my life lesson, but check your assumptions, validate your assumptions about anybody, be an ally. I volunteered for probably 5 organizations in cybersecurity, and most people are like, she's amazing, but I can't pay her. There's one person who, whenever they introduce me to someone, says she deserves to be here and she's extremely valuable. And just through that introduction and the way that we interface, anyone that comes into our circle or that we're acquainted with comes to me with that assumption that like, oh, she deserves to be here, which is a good assumption. I'm saying like, check your assumptions about, I always love to ask people open-ended questions to get to know them better, their background, their way of thinking. And I think if we did that in general as a society, we could solve a lot of the friction between different minds.
Clearly the correct assumption.
Yeah. There's some really good information, but I'm just looking at this list of organizations, and I would just lean on the kind of the networking thing, which has really helped me so much in my career. I'm also involved with the Blue Team Village, which is a village at DEF CON. I'm one of the directors, and we actually had an event at DEF CON this year, which partially supported Women in Security and Privacy, WISP. They're a really awesome organization. Diana Initiative is a full-fledged day-long conference that happens during Hacker Summer Camp in Vegas, alongside DEF CON and besides Vegas. Volunteering for organizations gives you exposure to so many people in the industry. And I think one other thing I would just want to say as a kind of a takeaway for networking, networking is not just about finding people who can help you get jobs. It's about finding people that give you insider information about what the culture of a company is like. So before joining the last couple companies that I got through networking, I had conversations about what it was like to work at that company. It's not guaranteed to be 100% accurate, but it can give you an idea of if you're going to flourish at that company. Unfortunately, like, you know, I think you mentioned in the studies there, a lot of the issues with underrepresented groups in cybersecurity or other tech fields is not actually getting in. It's growth within the organization or promotions. A lot of times you'll see like, oh, tier 1, you know, level 1, very diverse. Go up one level, gets a lot less diverse. I'm at a senior, almost a principal level at this point, and yeah, I can absolutely see that in pretty much every organization. So having those conversations with people that you're networking with, getting an idea of what the culture of a company is like is incredibly important. And getting involved with good nonprofits and other organizations that do good things like these organizations do.
Yeah, so it's funny because this is a perfect segue into our next question, which was how are these networking groups going to play a role in the future of women in cybersecurity? Let's see. I know we're running a little short on time, so I don't know. I think we'll pretty much wrap up here. But what's some closing remarks, some maybe things you haven't gotten out just quite yet through the questions that you want people to know about working in cybersecurity as a woman?
Just jump in the fire.
That's what I did.
Oh, that actually reminded me, there's another thing I was going to mention. I mean, everything's always on fire. That's why we do what we do. But there was something else I heard that was like, you know, when men look at a job description, they're like, oh, I only know 20% of those skills. I'm going to apply. And then when women or other underrepresented groups look, they say, oh, well, I only know 70%. I'm not going to apply. Don't do that. Just start. Just go anyways.
You probably have 100% other skills anyway. You probably do.
Yeah. Pro tip, those listings are like never actually written by the people who are actually hiring. So it's HR just being like, I'm going to throw a bunch of acronyms on here and maybe someone will meet that. And it's like, yeah, 20 years of Kubernetes experience? Okay.
Run a job, if you see a job rec, just for shits and giggles, run it through AI detector. Just saying.
I don't know. I feel like, but the last thing I said was my final thought. But yeah, keep showing up. I think that there is make cool projects. You know, that's also been really helpful in terms of just getting your hands wet. And then you have stuff to talk about, whether it's in forums or at events like this. So,
I mean, what I'll say is you are enough. You are enough for where you are. You as you are enough for your next step. And I'll just close with what I said at Shmoo, and I think it was 2022 in my talk, which is do hard things, talk about hard things, throw soft things. Thanks, y'all.
awesome.
Thank y'all, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Yes, I think we have a few moments for questions, if there is anything that you'd like to ask the panelists.
Or soft things.
Yeah.
All the way in the back?
Yes.
You've all had decent careers so far, some of them long. How do you deal with burnout?
The question was, how do we deal with burnout?
So I was actually thinking about that little like graph dip in around the pandemic. And then you said something about, it's like the women are we're expected to be the ones to stay home and take care of the kids and stuff. And that kind of all ties them together. And the pandemic just really made that much worse. I deal with it by not trying to be 100% because my 100% is like other people's 150%. So, and I've gotten good at saying no to things.
I'm less good at saying no to things. But I'm in a position where I mentor and lead a bunch of people on my team. So what helps me deal with burnout is forcing myself to lead from the front. So today I have turned off Slack, for example, because this is my day. Setting boundaries is hard for anybody. Women are socialized to not set them as well, but sometimes thinking, who is watching me not take care of myself is enough to kick my ass.
Totally. The only thing I would add is ask for help. So sometimes it's like, pay someone to come and help clean your house is probably the thing that would be easiest for me to not have burnout. Your brain, when it gets distracted, takes 15 minutes to get back into the groove. And something I've been practicing is like deep thought and thinking, especially because screen culture and scrolling I've seen it influence my brain and my deep thinking. And so as a caretaker, I'm quick to be like, oh, the computer's not doing what I want it to, so let me go do the dishes. And it's like forcing myself to, and even though I don't feel like I have the income, get somebody to help so that I can focus and not get burned out.
Yeah, there's one more concept. Most of us have probably heard about the glass ceiling. There's also something called the glass cliff, where in a situation where someone might be kind of hungry for an opportunity, you're given an opportunity, but it's to clean up someone's mess. And I think burnout and something I've had to learn recently is sometimes you just got to step back, set things up, you got to step back, and you just got to let it burn. And it's not your problem.
Let it burn. Yeah, I love that. It's like my life philosophy.
Toast marshmallows on it sometimes.
Dumpster fires for all.
Bring people to toast the marshmallows, because if something's burning and you're slightly amused about it, I guarantee you're not the only one.
Yeah. Any more questions?
We'll be around, so.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so thank you to everyone that's been helping with setting up JawnCon and running it, and the Handorfs especially, our panelists for their personal contributions, and for Jonathan for keeping me sane through this process the last couple weeks.
And to you for organizing this.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Our moderator, everybody.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Also, resources and citations, if y'all want to take a look at anything, I've got them linked up in a QR code, and it's not malicious, I promise.